So, when you have been focused on COVID, the Republicans have been talking about immigration. When you were focused on the Voting Rights Act, they were talking about immigration. Today, you're talking about 5 to 15. Today, they're talking about immigration. I'm wondering if House Democrats, if you guys, why are we not seeing the same thing? Is this a distraction on their part? Is it a mistake for House Democrats to not include immigration elements earlier in the agenda? I'm just trying to square how these two parties are talking about such different things as the key issue.
Well, I guess their Dr. Seuss approach didn't work for them, so now they've had to change the subject. But we do not prioritize our values and how we can make a difference in the lives of the American people to be attuned to the bankruptcy of ideas that the Republicans have. No, there was no mistake. The bill is, except for the minimum wage, again, certain tweaks here and there, which were not consequential. The bill is what we all agree to as the priorities to save lives and livelihoods, shots in the arm, money in the pockets, kids in the school safely, and workers back in their jobs. Yes, sir.
Madam Speaker, I just wanted to ask you about the surge of unaccompanied minors at the southern border. The Biden administration has acknowledged that the humanitarian effort that they have may be an incentive for them to come. What would you like to see done out there?
Well, I don't know. I haven't heard them say that would be an incentive. I do think what they are doing is talking to regional governments to say, keep them home, as well as if they have a case for refugee status or asylum seekers, to have that adjudicated have those interviews happen in the country of origin. But for those who are coming, they have a humane policy about how they, as quickly as possible, and it takes time because you want to do it right, can get them situated with family member or safe place for them to be. And it will be nothing like what we saw in the Trump administration of PBs being snatched from the arms of their parents. To me, as a mom and a grandmother, that to me is like the most vile, with stiff competition from the Trump administration, but one of the most vile things they did. So I think that I trust the Biden administration's policy to be based on humanitarian and love of children rather than political points or red meat for their Republican base. Now, let me just say one thing about asylum seekers. 4 years ago, around now, the then president put a Muslim ban in place. The same women who marched the day after the inauguration saw the power of their presence. And many of them marched to the airports and to other venues to protest the Muslim ban. But not only them, they were an example to others. And you saw an outpouring of disapproval of what the president was doing. We then had a session here. It couldn't be a hearing because we were in the minority, but we had a rump meeting about asylum seekers and opposition to the Muslim ban. We had the military come and say, how could they do this? We promised our interpreters and others who helped us in Iraq and Afghanistan who were Muslim that they could come to the United States, and this is hurting our security. We had our diplomats, maybe 1,000 signed a letter, which was unusual, that many, but them to testify about how this was bad for our national security from a diplomatic standpoint. We had economists saying this is bad for our economy in terms of the intellectual resources that we were depriving our country of. But why I bring it up is we had a representative of the American Evangelicals Association, or the Association of American Evangelicals. And what he said at that meeting that I think everybody should continue to remember, because the evangelicals have been really good on immigration and on asylum seekers and refugees. He said, the United States Refugee Resettlement Program is the crown jewel of American humanitarianism. And that was at a time when the administration was preparing to reduce the number that we received while encouraging other countries to take other asylum seekers. So it is it's a value decision that we have to make. And I think the difference between this administration and the one before is great in terms of how we meet the needs of these children, placing them as much as possible with family, but in other safe homes, and in the meantime to have a humanitarian reception for them wherever they are. It's a big. When I'll just tell you this one more thing. I took a group before COVID, so it was the last trip that I was able to take to Central America, to the Northern Triangle, Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, to see what was happening there in terms of dangerous situations that people were escaping, and that was the reason why they would risk crossing a desert, because they would die if they stayed home, and their children as well. What were the economic situation? What was it that we could help them with to keep people home? Because people really genuinely do like to stay home. One of the things that was interesting on that trip was that a number of the people who were leaving for economic reasons were farmers, because the drought had caused such a severe situation in the Northern Triangle, they could no longer farm. It was what was arable before was no longer arable. Again, a climate issue. And so there are all kinds of ways that we can help people be successful or comfortable, at least, at home, rather than coming to the United States, but to recognize there are many reasons why they do. Some because of the dangerous situation to their lives. And we could spend all day going on chapter and verse of all the young people we met and how they feared for their lives in the communities they were in. Yes, sir.
Madam Speaker, since the president has already started meeting with lawmakers from both parties on infrastructure, it seems like that may be the next legislative agenda item for the Biden administration. Curious your thoughts on the size and scope of a